conscious and unconscious patterns of having not wanted to be here, having not wanted to be me, being embarrassed about sort of being me, being sort of ashamed of who I'd been, sort of as I was growing up, and being so closed off. I'd gone through a process of letting that go, but I was still holding on to being ashamed of being me, being ashamed of being male. I was sort of still quite shy with myself. There was still times where I couldn't look at myself properly. It would almost be like I'd have to still build up the confidence to do that. And it's now 38 to say that I still at times couldn't stand in the mirror and look at myself. They were things that I wouldn't admit that I was still having problems with. They were things that I was helping other people through, not things that I was gripping onto myself. And this was my opportunity, was my gift to really start to let that go, because there would be a physical change. I've got a sort of a lovely 4.5-inch scar now. There's all sorts of other sort of physical changes. There's parts of my groin on the left side that I can't feel and may never be able to get the feeling back because of the operation and whatever else. But I love myself more today than I've ever done previously.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. So great to be with you again. I've got the beautiful Ainsley Threadgold with me today, one of the authors in the book Awakened by Death, and also an author in the book called The Transformative Experience of, I'm going to get that wrong, of Near-Death Experiences by Penny Satori and Kelly Walsh. He is, Ainsley, let me tell you a bit about Ainsley, has been a police officer since 2005, and he currently lives in the UK, although having a bit of a shift at the moment, in the middle of writing his book, which is the full story, which he hopes to finish this year, next year, sometime. In 2015, he met the love of his life, which, of course, if you've read the book or if you've seen some of our shows, Krista Gorman, who also had an NDE experience, and we'll talk about how they met, which is actually in the story in the book. He talks about how they met. And during the summer of 2016, Ainsley and Krista shared at IONS, the IONS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Experience, shared their stories. And his public Facebook page is the same title as the book he is writing, which is called Come and Find Me, Lifetimes of Love. Welcome to the show, Ainsley.
Hi.
We've had you on the show before, but we've actually never had you on to share your whole experience. I mean, obviously it's in the book, and interestingly enough, when you listen to a show, it's like reading a book and watching a movie. You can listen to someone speak, but it's quite different to actually reading their story. There's something about sitting on the couch or in bed with a book and reading someone's story. It's really personal. I actually find it quite beautiful, but we're going to share some of your story today and your updates. Do you want to, because, things have been happening and you've got lots to share with people, so I'm excited to hear what you and the carpenter have to say. So shall we start from the beginning? You were a child and you had this strange desire to break your arm. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a fascination that I had. I was 13 and I had never broken anything. I'd known people that had broken things and whatever else, and you get things that you sort of key into, especially as children. You get sort of fascinated with things, and for me, it was a fascination with breaking bones. What would it be like? And I remember a few times my friends at school and my mum it was a repeating message of "Be careful what you wish for." Little did I know that not that long after that I would experience breaking something, and in a huge way. It wasn't just a case of slipping over and breaking my arm. It was a case of being run over and being hit at 40 miles an hour and having my leg smashed to bits and having an experience because of it. So there was my be careful what I wish for.
I know, it's funny. I actually remember that experience too as a child, thinking, I wonder what it feels like. I wonder what it feels like. And then a friend of mine, a friend of my mum's child, fell off the swing, and I watched it happen in front of me, and I thought, okay, I don't want to know what it feels like anymore. So luckily, touch
sort
wood.
of like, okay, maybe not.
Okay, so it happened to somebody else instead of me, which is kind of lucky. But so you were hit by a car at 13 and died. And what happened?
Well, I mean, as it says in the book, at the time, I had no memory, absolutely no memory. I remember being at school that day. I remember that the last lesson I had was French. I remember going home, and that evening, I was going to help my dad and my brother deliver leaflets in the local area in a village I grew up in. I remember going out. That was quite mundane. I remember being taken back to my dad's car, my dad driving to the last place that we were going to deliver to, which was on a country lane. I remember the name of the country lane, and then that was it until I woke up in hospital about sort of midnight, which was about 7 or 8 hours later. The only thing that really struck me was whilst I was in hospital, one of the things that I'd treasured for my 13th birthday that year was a watch that had been bought, and it was the first watch that I'd sort of owned, and I was very proud of it. And that got smashed during the accident. So my parents bought me the same watch, and I put the watch on, and whilst I was in the hospital, the watch stopped. I had another one bought for me, and that stopped. And then successively, sort of every watch I had from that point, at some point within about a month, would break or stop or fall off or something. And then later on, in my teenage years into my 20s and whatever else, I found that things like mobile signal and radio signals would be quite sort of poor around me. I still have problems with mobile phones now. Sometimes I'll have it in my pocket and it'll just go dead. I'll put it on the side away from me, and then the signal will come back. It's sort of silly little things like that. But they were the only things that I realised at the time that was different. So I had no memory of what had gone on, which bugged me. It was just like a big black hole. And then I had these strange little things with not being able to wear a watch anymore for very long, and you know, then CD skipping and radio signals going and whatever else. And it wouldn't happen to the point of distraction. But I think the saving grace was back in the early 90s, technology was just starting to sort of really shoot forward. So we weren't exclusively using computers, we weren't exclusively using mobile phones. Had I lived maybe 10 years later, then those initial things probably would have been more pronounced, because there would have been more technology for me to break.
Funny, isn't it? But you know, a lot of NDEs say that the whole time thing, electronic thing, you know, I was emailing someone recently, and we were talking about her coming on the show, and she's saying, you know, I can't do computers because I'm a triple NDE. And I'm like, oh God, just ask your guides to sort it out, because you hold a different frequency, but you know, your guides know how to adjust the frequencies so that you can manage to do what we're doing now. Because she said, no, I can't do it because I hold this crazy frequency. But there's some healing surrounding that. There's a guy out in Florida, a guy called Mark Youngblood, and he does quantum healing. And he's very interested in people who've had near-death or spiritually awakening experiences. And what he has found from being in the ether and the energies there is that people who have these experiences get put back, and sometimes they get broken, so there's fractures, and it's the fractures that cause the disturbances. So it's almost like the disturbances are saying there's something not quite right. So it's not the fact that we're more highly tuned and we're disturbing these things. It's the fact that we're highly tuned, but we're highly tuned in a body that needs to be more aligned. Like with everything else, like with if you go to have acupuncture, the acupuncturist will deal with your energy meridians and start to realign those by using the needles. Someone who deals with Reiki will realign your energies in relation to your chakras. Now, if they're out of balance, if they're turning the wrong way or whatever else, then you will have physical outpourings.
I think the message from him is that when we have these experiences, if we're sort of like more gets put back, it's almost like putting too much water in a water balloon. Something's going to give and split and whatever else. And what happens after that is that it's a telltale sign that something needs to be realigned. And once the realignment happens, then it tends to be that there's more of a conscious seeing that these things don't happen so often.
Yeah. When you came back into your body as a child, you had quite a bit of amnesia when you first woke up, didn't you?
Mm.
Yeah. Do you think that okay, well, we'll talk about that. So you didn't remember for 21 years. And then what happened to make you start to remember? What was happening?
At that time in my life, I was probably physically in the worst shape I'd been in for a long time. I was spiritually in the wrong shape. I was sort of emotionally in a really bad place. I was very closed off. I was coming to the end of a long-term relationship, which we basically just kept lying to ourselves and trying to sort of keep going because we didn't know anything else. And that ended up being that I ended up with sciatica down my left leg. Now, it was the left leg that I had broken when I was run over. And the sciatica affected below my knee, and I couldn't feel below my knee. I could still move my leg, but I just couldn't feel it. And there was no power there. There's no power in the calf, and that would misfire and cramp and all sorts. And the thing for me was, I immediately found it interesting that was the same area that was affected when I broke my leg.
Right.
So when I went to see my chiropractor and hoping that he would put me back in line and that would release the pressure on the nerves, I spoke to him and I sort of started to talk about the correlation between my accident and this happening, because I was interested to see whether there was anything physiologically that was that meant that leg was more susceptible.
Right.
And then I started to talk about the not being able to wear a watch and not having a memory and whatever. And he said, "Sounds like you've had an NDE, but you just don't remember it." I'm like,
God
what?
bless that chiropractor. I tell you what, people they're put in your path when you need them, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
bit of a wake up call by the body happening to my brother right now. Health crisis, and someone saying, "Wake up, wake up." I've had so many conversations with channels and mediums and amazing, spiritual beings that have been woken up through the pain in their body or some sort of health crisis, and because
it's the universe going, it'll get louder, it'll get harder.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just those thoughts of ours, those conditioned limiting thoughts that just keep us on this treadmill of struggle and strive and anyway. Okay, so God bless him. And then you went and had some hypnosis because you thought, oh, this might be right. And you had some hypnosis sessions, and that it all started to be revealed.
Yeah, I mean, I'd done some research into near death and whether there was any associations in the UK. There was one related to the book that I was given by Penny Satori, which was where the link started to happen.
Yeah.
Followed with me meeting Krista in the end. I wrote to her website, and whilst I was waiting for an answer, I was like, what else can I do to possibly see if I can access these memories? Because I'd read her book. And when I was reading other people's experiences, their after effects sounded very similar to me. And it was the first time that I was almost looking at my own experience saying, well, that sounds like me, and that sounds like me, and I do that, and I feel that. But I still didn't have the memory. And the best way I could figure to access those locked away memories was perhaps to use hypnosis. So I sort of...
I'm just thinking, I've said this so many times on the show, I've never had an NDE, not that I know of. I mean, I think we die every night, and we're reborn again every morning. But I've not had one like people have had them talk about. And yet I have all those symptoms, never been able to wear a watch, all that sort of stuff. So I wouldn't call them symptoms. I would call them, I don't know what you call them, abilities, frequencies, whatever. And can talk to the spirit guides and all that sort of stuff. But I have to say, I sort of sort that out when I was in my 30s. I wanted to expand that and did. But I'm just sitting here thinking, listening to you, and maybe I did when I was a baby and I just have no memory of it. Maybe something happened.
Yeah, I mean, part of the remembering of my experience led me to understanding that to be put back in my body, there had to be some sort of an override. So I couldn't go back into the shell that was existing.
This is something I want to talk to you about. So let's just tell people what happened. So you got hit by the car, as what your memories showed you. And when you left your body, what happened? Like when you were hit by the car, what happened? Do you remember that? Or did you?
I mean, my sort of hypnosis memories of it were more to do with being outside of my body and what I was shown whilst I was upstairs, as it were, and it was being sort of felt to me that the body that I'd left was dead and it was broken, and I couldn't return to that to do what it was that I'd pre-chosen to do here. So that part of it would have to be sort of overwritten. Is the best way I can describe it. So the body I was put back in was still broken, but it was broken enough to be able to heal, and for me to do all the things that I did in that 21 years, but also all the things that I'm now doing.
This is something that it's a little bit confusing. So, yes, you say in your chapter that the child's body was dead, like that you met the carpenter, and he told you that the body that you'd left was dead and broken, and that he'd have to give you a new body. How did that work? How did that work?
It's almost like if you think about editing anything, so you're going to edit this, there's going to be bits of it that you'll splice out and then add together. So there's 5 minutes there that I don't need, but I want this bit and I want this bit. So what you do is you cut the 5 minutes out and you go, doop, and you put them back. So what you've then got is you've got a new reel. And it was almost like for me to go back. Obviously, one part of it was the choosing, but the other part was for me to be put back in a body that I could exist in. And for that little bit of time where the body was dead, had to be sort of overwritten. So
okay, so he's saying that he changed your timeline. He basically changed your timeline, which you can do from that perspective. I've had many conversations with people that have talked about this.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I remember reading that part in the book and thinking, so how did he do that? Like, did he just how did he give you a new body? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sort of the overwrite, and I think the overwrite sort of fits best for how I picture it when I'm sort of in my conscious body. And I've read about it. Neil Donald Walsh comments on it a couple of times in his books, where people have had what they refer to as near misses, and some of them being quite profound, where they're thinking, I shouldn't still be alive. I don't know how that car missed me. I don't know how I didn't get trampled by that horse or whatever else. And he says what happens is that the original timeline, the car did hit you and the horse did trample you. But you've had the ability to choose to come back without remembering that you left. So you have something which allows your conscious mind to deal with it, which is the sort of the near miss, as it were. But you don't necessarily have the memories of what happened in the original timeline. Things are just sort of overwritten, and then you carry on. And that's sort of feels like what I was shown, which is that was the case for me. And I had no conscious memory of it, but obviously there was a reason for me not having the memory, and the reason for me to regain or start to regain the memories when I did. I couldn't have lived the same life if I had the memory straight away. I couldn't have coped with it. I certainly wouldn't have been able to cope with waking up thinking that the love of my life is there and I've got to wait 22 years for it. That would have been, and I wouldn't then have had any of the other experiences. I wouldn't have met my ex-wife. I wouldn't have had the experiences with her. We wouldn't have our daughter who's thriving. So all of those positive things that came out of that relationship would never have happened.
What you say in the book is exactly that you were given the amnesia so that you could live the human life with all the mistakes and all the trauma and all the beauty and all the bliss and all the experiences, so that you could have this life, this human life, and it wasn't written in that timeline that you would be awake during that time, because it was like your soul wanted to experience being human. I remember my daughter as a little kid, when I used to have conversations like that, she'd just look at me and say, I'm just a kid, Mum. I'm just a kid. I don't want to know about this stuff. And she was giving me this message that I don't want to be awake. I want to be a kid, and I want to do what kids do, and I don't want to know who I really am. I just want to know that I'm a kid. And I really got that message from her then. And so it's interesting, you know, like it's that you talk about Neil Donald Walsh, because when I hear him talk today, you know, he led a pretty tumultuous life. I still feel in him some sort of remorse or guilt for the life he led compared to the life he leads, you know, since he's had his experience and written his books. And there's still some sort of remorse that he was so selfish, I would say, like he talks about himself like that. But with your story, it just demonstrates that we come to be selfish. We come to do that. We come to experience the contrast. We come to have the contrast, and you know, and people wake up in their own time when they've had enough of life. And I just thought that was beautiful, that part. Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, even for years before I had any conscious memories, I was still being given people to help, to talk to. I was being talked through. I knew that I was being talked through. I just didn't know why. And I'd sort of, I'd been to church, and that was like a mini awakening. And then I went back to sleep, but I was still sort of being given people in the position I was in. I am in a position of trust. I'm in a uniform, and people will come up and they will just talk about anything, and then all of a sudden anything turns into something quite personal. It might be something that they've never shared with anyone else, and it's funny how they always sort of seem to gravitate towards me to do that. And when I was in my 20s, the thing that I noticed was that I might well only have been repeating what other people have told that person, but it's only then that something clicks in them. It's almost like this repeating message. Suddenly it goes, and then you wake up to it. And it was always at those times where I felt like I was being spoken through. There was always sort of authority and a power. I'd get sort of like a warm feeling here, and it would sort of, and it still does. It sort of spouts out. And then it made sense when I was given the memories of why, when, you know, the carpenter said, you will speak for me and I'll speak through you. It's sort of like, that's why that happens. That's why I feel that sort of, and it's not something that, not something that I can't control is sort of the wrong thing, but it's sort of almost purposeful when those people are put in front of me. And I know that that's why. And certainly in the job that I have now, where I'm dealing with a lot of people who have suicidal thoughts, and those people who I'm lucky enough to get to before they actually commit the act.
Jump in front of the train.
Yeah, I very often find that because I've had so many of the contrasting experiences, I can bring those experiences in to speak to them. And had I not had those experiences, I wouldn't even be able to empathise with them.
Exactly.
Let alone anything else. So I'm so grateful for having had those experiences, so that I can say, look, I know a little bit of how it feels to be like that. I know how it feels to be depressed. I know how it feels to not want to be here, or certainly not want to be you and struggle with it. I also know how it feels to want to be here. And I am now your example of what it's like to move through those things.
Yeah.
And even if it just gives that person that moment or an extra day or whatever else, I don't know what happens to them after we get the help that they require. That's then up to the National Health Service and whatever.
Yeah.
But all I know is that time with them was gifted. It was gifted for them, and it was gifted for me.
Yeah.
And it sort of shows that that's why.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the traumas that we live, we could say that we live them so that we could help others, you know, overcome their traumas. Because people, as you know, when they're in trauma, they're not easy to speak to. If someone's dead set on jumping in front of a train. So last time you were on the show, you shared that you work in the railways, and you often talk people out of jumping in front of trains, and sometimes clean up bodies that have been, you know, run over. Pretty horrific job. Pretty amazing job. But yeah, so when someone's dead set on jumping in front of a train, how do you talk them out of it?
I just keep talking to them. They know they're not going to go anywhere. There's times when people are. I've had times in hospital where I've had to fight with people for the whole time that I'm there, and that can be hours. I had one guy that basically pulled off the line, and pretty much from the time that he got to hospital till the time that I was relieved, I was fighting with him because he wanted to get out, and that was his thing. He was sick of life. You'd get brief moments where he'd stop to rest, and he would talk about quite positive things that he'd done or he'd experienced or people he'd met, whatever else. And he was a fascinating guy. And then all of a sudden something would change again. It was almost like he was possessed. His eyes would change. He'd start sort of spitting and snarling, and his voice would change as well. It was that thing. And sometimes I was holding him down, thinking, "Who am I holding down here? I'm not holding down this. I'm not holding down this guy that I was just speaking to." It was just a complete flip. And they're people that are just as important as a sort of a growth point for me as those people that I can just sit there and talk quietly to. They know that they're not going to be able to go anywhere. I'm I'm not small. I'm 240 pounds, which is about 17 stone. I've done martial arts all my life. I keep myself fit. So they know that they're not going to go anywhere even if they try, but I don't have to force them. It's just a case of, you're not going to go anywhere, so you might as well talk to me. And there have been times where people have gone from being one extreme to a complete other, just because there's been something that I've said or we've spoken about that's clicked.
Yeah.
And then there's the way in. It's sort of like, it's almost like wearing down a rock over time. It will wear down into a pebble. And it's about getting to that sort of little pebble that's inside. And again, everyone is different. Everyone presents in a different way, but everyone is a gift to me. And I hope that in that moment that perhaps I and my colleagues are gifts to them. I tend to work with quite spiritually aware people, even if they're not outwardly spiritual. I then sort of will have a conversation one day, and it's sort of like, I'm not with you by chance.
Yeah.
It's not a mistake that I'm with, my sergeant's very spiritual, and I didn't know that until recently.
Oh, really?
And it's sort of, it made sense with him, with the way he is, because he's very much the same with people. He'll sort of talk and joke with people, and then all of a sudden he'll find his way in. Yeah. So when we've ever worked together with someone who's in stress, then they basically haven't got a chance. They just open up. It's almost like you've got two people here that care about you in this moment. So, you're not going anywhere until we've worn you down, and we sort of generally tend to do that. So, it's awesome to see.
That is awesome. I wanted to ask you, have you shared your experiences with your colleagues, but you've obviously shared it with your sergeant. I mean, do they know that you've written in a couple of books, that your story's out there in a couple of books? And
yeah, he does. I mean, because he's sort of the most open out of the people that I work with. And then there's been a few other people who know bits because they've been interested, and we've just happened to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll share bits and bobs. And for me, it's sometimes the sharing is important, then other times it's just about the ability to use what I've come back with.
Let's get into your conversation with the carpenter, because this is what a lot of people that watch the show, when I put up NDEs, everyone's looking for Jesus. Like I get so many people, Christians predominantly, pretty much 100%, saying if they didn't meet Jesus, then they're meeting the devil, which is kind of interesting. But so here we have an NDE, and you met the carpenter, as you call him.
Yeah.
What did he feel like? How did he appear to you? And did you know who you were talking to at the time?
Yeah, he was feeling wise, as it's described in the book. The two most profound things were him kneeling down to my height. I was the 13-year-old whilst I was up there. Although I wasn't sort of in my body. I sort of was still aware of myself. And his energy as a sort of a male in a white cloak knelt down to my level, which was about as loving as you can be when you come down to a child's level, rather than talking above them. when you come down to a child's level, that regardless of the age of the child goes, they're talking to me, they're not talking at me.
Yeah.
And they then are understood. And that was the feeling that I got, was that he wanted to talk to me as a friend. He wasn't above me, he wasn't on a pedestal. The reason why I introduced himself as the carpenter, I feel, is that he didn't need to give me a title. I didn't need to for him to say I'm Jesus or whatever else. It was up for my interpretation, and it was also up for anyone else who interprets it that way.
So did the 13-year-old you say, "Who are you?" and he said, "I'm the carpenter"? Is that how it happened?
He introduced himself as the carpenter.
I'm the carpenter.
I know you as you know me, and I love you as I love everyone else. And then the physical sensation of him placing one hand over my heart and the other hand on my face whilst I was having the hypnotherapy. Although I was sort of aware of the fact that I was on the hypnotherapy table, I was also aware of the sensation of having a hand on my chest and a hand on my face. I could physically feel the warmth of a hand on my face.
Nice.
It was completely profound, just to have that and to feel total love, like the love that I would imagine if you could remember back to being newborn, that you would feel when you placed on your mother's chest or you held in your father's arms. There's that sort of, I know from when my daughter was born, that's just holding there.
Oh, you're going to have us all crying now. Make my mascara rung, Ainsley.
and mine.
Oh yes, I can feel it. Oh, if only we could all feel it more often. Just that total unconditional love. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's beautiful.
And that was regardless. It wasn't a case of, well, you can only have this if you've been good, or this is what you can have if you go back and you live a pious life and never make any mistakes. And it was completely different than what I'd believed or been taught growing up in a sort of, not so much a Christian school, but when I was young, we had hymns every day, we did prayers, I went to Sunday school. We were already aware of things like sin and but being proper.
Being proper. Being proper and don't sin. Yeah, they love to teach us about that, don't they?
Except that was already in my awareness, and and that was not what I'd been taught. He loved me anyway.
And
it was
he loved you enough to send you back with total amnesia, and so that you would fall over and stumble through life and make lots of mistakes and and lots of triumphs, and just to have that human life. I mean, we complain so much about these tumultuous human lives, and yet the love that sends us here is, it's like love that sends us here to have them. It's like Esther Hicks says from the Teachings of Abraham, you're so free that you're free to create heaven or hell while you're here. And, you can't create that when you're over there. The freedom that love, the unconditional love and the freedom that you're given here.
Yeah, and it's the expression of that as much as we possibly can in this human form, especially when we've come into an understanding of the darkness that we all hold, this sort of dualistic nature that we have. When we can express that in human form, even if it's just for a moment, then that is what it is to create heaven on earth. We all carry this. I advocate this firmly with wherever I go. I carry heaven inside. We all have the divine spark in here. And I know that people struggle. I know that people who've had NDE struggle, and I know that people who've had spiritually transformative experiences also struggle, and they want to be in the loving arms of what's on the other side. And I understand that to a point, but we all chose to be here.
I know, that's the irony of this. It's like we all want to be in the loving arms that's on the other side, but when we're in those loving arms on the other side, we all want to be here. It's like,
and we choose. For those people whose experiences they feel as though they were sent back. For me, and the impression I get and the feeling that I get is that if that's what they were shown there at that point, they also then weren't shown what they pre-chose.
Yeah.
Because we all have the chance to pre-choose as souls what we want to do in life, who we want to meet, how we want to be, and whatever else. And we also pre-choose the experience, and we also pre-choose to come back from it.
I know in the chapter that you wrote in Awakened by Death, I'll just pop it up here so people can see it. You speak about that predestined. You know, a lot of people say, if we've got free will, are we, you know, is there stuff predestined, or is it we have ultimate choice to, you know, how does all that work? And you kind of talk about it quite nicely in that we, you know, choose points along the way, but in between those 2 points, we can, you know, the path isn't like that. The path, we can take any path. Like we've got free will to like mess it up, choose hate over love, choose love over hate. Like we've got complete free, but at some point, you know, we have these predestined points sort of mapped out in our life. Do you want to just explain that a bit more?
Yeah, it's funny. I know that we'll perhaps get onto this later on in the conversation, but it's something that more recently has made a lot more sense to me. Going from point A to point B with the experiences that I've had over the last couple of months, I realise more, because I'm experiencing it, that I can choose point A, which is where I get told the news, which we'll discuss later. And then there's a point B, which is the next part of the journey. Now, I can choose to go between those 2 points in fear. Those 2 points might well stay the same, but who am I between those 2 points?
Absolutely.
Am I accepting of it? Am I learning how to love myself? Am I seeing the journey, those steps, as a gift, or am I seeing them as some sort of terrifying nightmare? And when I get to point B, how am I when I get there? Am I disheveled? Have I had the worst journey? Have I been in the car, stuck in traffic? There's been an accident. Have I been diverted? Have I got lost? Or have I gone, do you know what? I'm very loving and accepting of what this is here to show me.
Exactly.
And then you get there in a completely different way, and love being the guide means that it doesn't stop things from happening. It doesn't stop experiences from coming up. It doesn't stop things from tripping us over and us rolling around and hurting our knees. What it does is it allows us to stand with the perspective of loving detachment, regardless of what it is. And I've sort of been to the brink a few times in the last few months where I've had some terrible sort of temporary news, and at the face of it, this is terrible. This could be the end of me. There could be in a few months' time that could be it. There could be people crying at my graveside. That sort of terrifying. But love, always being the guide, has always blessed me with the people that love me. And what they're willing to do for me is what I'm willing to do for myself. And the more that I'm willing to do for myself, the more I'm willing to love myself, the more I get to experience, the more I get to perceive in those loving reflections in other people. Krista, over the last couple of months, has completely just blown me out of the water with the amount of love that she is prepared to show. You know, when I was diagnosed, when I was ill.
Well, let's tell people what's happening with you so that, you know, it makes...
They're not going, what does he mean?
Yeah, what are you talking about, Ainsley? Okay.
That's perfectly fine to me.
So some of these points that we predestine are often health points. I'm going through something personal too. My brother just went through triple bypass last night. And that's one of the predestined points along the way. And as you say, like you have these points. One might be marriage and the birth of children, but you know, points that are challenging and points that are beautiful too. These predestined points, and you're experiencing one of those points now, which is a health problem. Do you want to share with people what's been happening?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer back in May. That after I had an operation which was successful, which they call an orchidectomy, which means that they make an incision above the groin. So basically, what they hope to do is to pull everything out from the top. So all the cord, the testicle itself, and anything else that shouldn't be there, they take out. The process after that is blood tests, a CT scan, and they also biopsy what they've taken out. The options being that what they've taken out could be benign. It is a type of testicular cancer, or sometimes it can be something else.
Yeah.
And where I'd been led to believe that it was testicular cancer, I had an appointment sort of halfway through trying to get better, where the consultant for urology, or one of the consultants for urology, couldn't look me in the face to tell me that they believed it was lymphoma instead, which is a completely different kettle of fish, because it's in the lymphatic system, which is in the blood. So it isn't localized to the testicle, because the testicles are an extremity of the body. It means that the cancers that can form there are mild, whereas go on.
So when you say he couldn't look you in the face to tell you it's lymphoma, is it lymphoma or is it testicular cancer?
It is actually testicular cancer, but the time when they'd done, they'd done the biopsies at that time, and
right.
where they'd sent it to, they were looking for signs of testicular cancer in the slides that they have, and a couple of the slides showed something different.
Yeah.
And with the CT scan, there was a couple of lymph nodes which were enlarged, and because of those things, that's what they were worried about. But when I went to, it was actually a lady consultant, and she couldn't look at me because she's a urology consultant. That's her world. That's what she knew. She was the one that pulled the short straw to tell me that they believed that it was lymphoma, which is a different type of cancer and not one that they have answers for. So not only was I given this news, which I was quite confused about, I had someone that had no ability to explain what that meant. It was like, this is what we've been told. I'm telling you this, and I can't tell you anything else because I'm a urologist. I'm not a hematologist. You need to have another appointment.
Yeah, the medical profession, I'm not a fan. But, let's talk about it from a conscious perspective. Obviously, when you're having these sorts of conversations, you can face crazy people in the medical profession slightly differently. Instead of sort of getting so caught up with all the, like what the name of the disease is and where it is and all that sort of thing, you can sort of bring it back to what's the lesson here and what do I need to let go of. And this is something that you've been doing, yeah? How did you meet the news, from your conscious perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd already been sort of doing that lovingly with the finding out about the testicular cancer and talking to Krista about it. And, we both knew that this was an external sort of almost like an external reference point to something that I wasn't letting go of, and something that I now had the chance to get rid of, let go of, give to the light. As physically I would be giving something up, it was my chance to let go of the energy that was causing that. It was almost like this is your first chance to start letting go of this stuff, because this needs to go before you do everything else. Now, if you don't let it go, then like with everything else, if you try and retain and hold down and be scared of the energy, then something else is going to happen, and something else is going to happen. And it's not anything bad. We're not being punished. It's just that this is the way that holding on to negative energy manifests itself. It has to have a physical outpouring for us sometimes to say, oh, hang on a minute, it's not just that's wrong. There's something that this is showing me. This is a gift, and that's how I always saw it. Obviously, Krista, at the time when we had the original diagnosis, as soon as she found out that I had a date for my operation, she basically dropped everything here. And as people are aware, I live in the UK and she lives in Florida. So, she dropped everything and was willing to come 4,500 miles to be with me for my op. Now, when most people turn around and say, I'd do anything for that person, I really love that person, they very rarely get a chance to prove it, but Krista did, in a big way.
I know. The love story between you two is so beautiful.
Yeah.
People can read about that in the book, because you actually go into it in the book. It's so gorgeous. And so what did you find that you needed to let go of? What was the thought forms that you think that were creating the disease in your body, the dis-ease?
It was conscious and unconscious patterns of having not wanted to be here, having not wanted to be me, being embarrassed about sort of being me, being sort of ashamed of who I'd been, sort of as I was growing up, and being so closed off. I'd gone through a process of letting that go, but I was still holding on to being ashamed of being me, being ashamed of being male. I was sort of still quite shy with myself. There was still times where I couldn't look at myself properly. It would almost be like I'd have to still build up the confidence to do that. And it's now 38 to say that I still at times couldn't stand in the mirror and look at myself. They were things that I wouldn't admit that I was still having problems with. They were things that I was helping other people through, not things that I was gripping onto myself. And this was my opportunity, was my gift to really start to let that go, because there would be a physical change. I've got a sort of a lovely 4.5-inch scar now. I've got, I've only got one testicle whereas I had two before. And there's all sorts of other sort of physical changes. There's parts of my groin on the left side that I can't feel and may never be able to get the feeling back because of the operation and whatever else. But I love myself more today than I've ever done previously. Going back to the sort of the temporary diagnosis of the lymphoma, that again, though that was sort of quite a dark little sort of period. I mean, it was a period of sort of that afternoon into that evening. I'd not done myself any favours. I'd done some reading around the subject and found that for someone of my age to have a primary lymphoma in that area, that would be a grave prognosis, and I'd unlikely be here at all. And facing that, it wasn't so much about me passing on, it was about the effect that I would have on other people. And the fact that, Krista and I had come so far with our plans and what we wanted to do, and it was all these things about sort of how on earth am I going to sort of share that, how on earth am I going to sort of come this far with all of these lovely things that we're starting to come into place, and then all of a sudden have them. And then again, Krista sort of blew that out of the water by turning around and saying, it doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it takes. If we have to bring you over to the States and you have to have treatment over here, then that's what we'll do. If I have to leave work and come stay with you for a few months, then that's what we'll do. I'm with you all the way. What can you say? I mean, that's something that I would do. I would do that for her in a heartbeat. But to have her do that for me, to experience that, even at that grave point, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what the prognosis was, because I knew that whether we had a month or whether we have the rest of our lives, we have that love that we've always wanted to share in this life in this way. And as it was, that then put love firmly back in my sights, and it was firmly my guide again. And after the weekend, I had a phone call off someone who worked for the haematology department as like specialist nurses, who'd promised to call me when they had a meeting about my biopsy results, because they had to be sent off to be done again by a haematology specialist. And I get the phone call in the middle of town. I'm with my mum. We're just about to go into a health food store to get me lots of new supplements to try and help me cope with all this. And I get told that actually what they found is that it is a testicular cancer, not a lymphoma. So it's gone from lymphoma to going back to being what they call a seminoma.
Well, isn't that interesting? So it's a better prognosis, basically.
By a million miles.
And what's really interesting is that we talked about like splicing timelines. Your realization of how loved you are in this physical life not just from your spiritual life, but in this physical life, might have spliced that timeline and the diagnosis changed. And they might say, oh, we made a mistake. But isn't that interesting that you can shift the reality by shifting your frequency? Or listening to your story, Ainsley, experiencing love in heaven, where we come from that realm of pure positive energy, is all well and good. But when that's all you know, you can't really know it as fully as coming into a physical body, experiencing hate and trauma and depression and abandonment and all the things that and then re-experiencing that physical love of like getting sick and then somebody traveling to the other side of the world saying, doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter about anything, I'm here for, that's why we come, right? Like that's what we come to experience. You can't do that when you're dead, sort of thing. It's like,
well, no, and it's far too easy to. It's not just far too easy. We are the love that we seek here. So it can't not be what we are. When we come here, we get to sort of experience that, and the sort of the opposite to that. We get to experience being the dark of the dark behind the star, as well as being the star itself.
But we wouldn't experience it so profoundly had we not had the dark. Like it's like only knowing hot. You don't know what hot feels like unless you've been freezing cold, and then you come back to the heat. Now you go, okay, now I really know what hot feels like. It's because that contrast is why we come, which is something that people forget when they're going through their contrast. They forget, like, as I say, I've got family traumas happening now, and I see it all as beautiful, and people sort of think I'm crazy, but I know that there's beauty in the contrast. Like, my brother, as I say, he's a bit of a cynical old bastard. He's saying, I'm a bit of a cynical old bastard. It's the first time he's ever said that, but it took a heart attack for him.
Huh? Really? I hadn't noticed. I thought you were sort of
for him to actually see it and to stop being it. There's so much beauty in the contrast. There's just so much beauty in the contrast. And interestingly enough, when you meet the contrast with that gratitude, it just all melts away. All the pain and all the sickness and all the trauma just melts away.
Yeah. Well, it's the fact that from an egotistic point of view, we want guarantees. We want guarantees that we're going to be okay. Again, like I've said before, we like to talk about things that have happened to us and how we've done that journey, because it's something that's already happened and it's in the benefit of hindsight. So we're in a place sharing it when we're actually okay. I've been through this. This is what I've learned, and I'm sharing it with you from a completely different perspective on this stage or whatever else. For me, I'm going through it and still being as if it's hindsight. I'm sort of living it because I know that there isn't a guarantee. I'm not guaranteed the next day, but what I have got is infinite possibilities.
Absolutely.
Where I've had that perspective, then I've been gifted after gifted after gifted. During the time that they thought it was lymphoma, the one thing that I wanted to do was to come to the States to have some time to convalesce with Krista. Krista's daughter was turning 18, and I had this present I wanted to give her, and I wanted to give it to her myself. That was all sort of like shut down. No, you can't go anywhere because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know whether this is aggressive. We don't know whether it's not. We don't know whether you're going to have treatment straight away. So they're like, you can't go anywhere. And then all of a sudden I'm told that actually it goes back to the original diagnosis, and actually we're happy for you to fly out. And literally the next day after that I was here. And I was here, not only was I here sort of as I planned, I was actually here for a week or so before I planned, and I've been here for 2 weeks after I'd planned. My annual leave before I was ill showed being here from the 14th of July till the 24th of July. I arrived here on the 11th, and I don't leave until tomorrow.
Yeah.
So this was one of the gifts, was having this length of time, and I was always meant to have this length of time.
There's many more gifts for you. I want to talk about your future, because okay, so here's the story. Died at 13, didn't remember for 21 years, had hypnosis, found a group of people that had NDEs, saw this person that you had memory of from your NDE, fell in love, but living on two opposite sides of the planet. And now married recently. What was it, at the end of last year or the beginning of this year?
It was February this year.
February, right. And now married. Yay! Beautiful. But what will you do when you move to the States? Will you still be a police officer, or have you planned to be out there on the stage, bringing the word of the carpenter? I mean, what's the plan, Ainsley?
I can't. According to the statute, the law in Florida, I can't be a police officer until I'm a citizen here, and that will take 3 years with the spousal visa process, which is that I'm at the moment. So once I'm granted that, I'm given a green card and I'm allowed to stay here as a permanent resident. But it takes 3 years from the point of entry before I can apply for citizenship. Once I've got that, then I would be able to reapply should I wish. So what we're doing at the moment, Krista and I are both doing a personal training qualification for fitness.
Right.
That's one string to many strings adding to the bow that we're looking at doing. From that perspective, we want to bring our holistic approach, holistic approach to people. By not just helping them to train to keep physically fit, but also by using what we've learned to perhaps help them.
Oh, it's so needed. It's really so needed. When you go to health clubs, fitness clubs, gyms, whatever you want to call them, there's lots of, advice on what to eat and how to exercise, and then maybe a yoga class or two, and some of them throw in a meditation. But they leave the whole, the mind, body, spirit thing. They leave the whole spirit thing out of the equation. I've been asking these centres for years. I mean, I'm in Australia. There was a centre called Mind, Body, Spirit, and I said to them, apart from giving us massages and meditation and exercise, I said, where's the spirit component of your mind, body, spirit centre? And they said, we get a massage. And I'm like, right, what else?
What do you then define as spirit?
Well, it's teaching people how to flow their energy, how to raise their vibe, how to, overcome their stressful thoughts, how to connect to their guidance, how to feel that unconditional love of source. I mean, all that we talk about on this show, I keep the mind body out of it, and I'm just talking the spirit on the show. but it's so needed inside exercise routines, because that's the mainstream, right? I mean, both you and Krista are still very involved in the mainstream world with your jobs, and you bring that spirit component to your jobs
into it. And the idea is to over time that there's a number of different options. Krista, with being a physician's assistant out here, is coming to the point where she knows that probably by the end of this year she won't be working from the ER anymore. There's different options for her. One of them is a potential for opening like a GP's practice out here. Now, the brilliant thing about that is the fact that she would be dealing with the Western medicine side of things, because that's how she's qualified, but we would also be looking towards doing the more sort of spiritual Eastern side of things. We know lots of people that have lots of different healing modalities and the different things in the pipeline that we ourselves would like to advocate as well. Whilst we've been here, we watched a documentary called Forks Over Knives, which is about the benefits of becoming vegan. We've become vegan since, and have to say the benefits are huge. And not just the physical, not just the sort of the feeling better benefits, but also the benefits of being able to reverse certain types of diabetes, reverse heart disease, stop and or reverse cancer, because of going from an omnivoric diet, which we're actually not, we're still not sort of designed for. We are actually designed for more of a sort of a herbivore, plant-based diet. It's just that we've had this thing forced that we need to eat meat to get protein, we need to have dairy to have calcium.
The conversation around diet is one that I'm used to. In my 20s, I studied as a naturopath, and no one could agree what to put in our body. As long as what we put in our body, we're in alignment that it is healthy. Because when you're eating with guilt, like I shouldn't eat this chocolate, or I shouldn't eat this biscuit, or I shouldn't eat. If you're eating with guilt, you completely digest food differently than when you're eating with pleasure.
Or you're digesting the guilt.
You digest the guilt, yeah. And I am an advocate for vegetarian and veganism, but not because of health, but because of sustainability. I just don't think that, we can sustain 7 billion people on the planet. We can't sustain our eating habits. It's just killing Mother Gaia. It's just killing the planet, polluting the air. And, the cattle and dairy industry is one of it's even bigger pollutant than cars, interestingly enough. So that's my, sort of look at it, but I don't see any of it, just like none of the contrast is wrong. I don't see any of it as right as wrong. It's just what
exactly
you line
it is
up
what it
with.
is.
Yeah, it is what it is. My brother, who, as I said, is just in hospital at the moment, I had this conversation with him a year ago about being a vegetarian or cutting down meat, not necessarily taking out of your diet, because of the sustainable, do you want to have a planet that your grandchildren can live on that's not completely... And he goes, yeah, of course. So he was all up for the argument. Like he said, it's a really good argument. And I really agree. And I said, so you're going to cut down the meat in your diet? He said, nope. You know what? He will today.
Yeah.
He will today. Yeah. So
it's the thing about leading a horse to water, isn't it? You can't lead a horse to water, but when the horse is ready, it'll go itself. And sometimes it's just a case of saying, the water's over there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that that is in alignment with Krista and I is not about forcing things down people's necks. It's about saying, this is our experience. This is what we've gone through, and this is what we've experienced, and these are the results. And from the perspective of doing something like changing diet and whatever else, I mean, I've always kept myself very fit.
Yeah.
Speak to Krista about sort of like some of the exercise that I do. I'm a bit of a gym monster. I like to work hard, and I like to sweat, and I really enjoy myself there. But probably over the last sort of 4 years, as I've gotten sort of more towards 40, the thing that I haven't been able to do, although I've been able to make muscular gains, I haven't been able to stop putting the weight on in the danger areas, which is around the stomach.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that has something to do with, like you said before, about what we put in our systems and how we feel about it, and whether you're consciously eating or unconsciously eating and whatever else. But for me, watching the documentary and then feeling out for myself, especially having gone through a cancer scare, it sort of made sense that, well, I'm being given this gift, I'm going to just try it. So we've been sort of on it for 8 or 9 days. I've not had, I think I've had 2 occasions where I've been hungry. The rest of the time I'm not hungry. And again, whilst I've been getting better, I've also been able to increase my work rate in the gym. We've had some really good workouts. I've not had any detriment from not having meat. We've just had benefits. And if those benefits continue, losing the weight that I don't need and whatever else, and looking better and feeling better, then when I'm helping other people, I'm not then going to be the fat dietitian. I'm not going to be turning around saying, well, you need to eat this and you need to eat that, and not do it myself. It's like, well, this is me. This is what I've been through. This is what's helped me. If you want, then you can go ahead and do that for yourself, and I'll help you. If you don't want, then that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the health crisis that you've experienced is just another feather in your hat, actually, to help other people who are experiencing health crisis. Why would I listen to you, mate? You go to the gym, you're a gym junkie and a vegetarian, you're always healthy, and you can say, well, actually, no. And they go, oh, okay, now I'm listening. So it just kind of makes your message even more powerful, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it strikes at the heart of, again, with things like cancer, like with heart disease or whatever else, it's something that you either experience yourself or other people in your family or your friend group that have gone through it or are going through it, and you see the impact. I mean, for me, a few years ago, I had a friend that had testicular cancer but had ignored the symptoms because he was scared of it. His dad had had something similar and had died from it. And he was in a huge amount of fear. And the cancer spread and it went in his liver and into his stomach, and he had to have a couple of major operations to take out the spread. And he was ill for a long time. he's okay now, and 12 years later he's had kids and whatever else. But he put himself in a position where he sort of almost forced that to happen before he would do something about it. You know, and having witnessed that, and knowing full well that there's lots of other people out there who have probably also had to see friends and family go through the same thing. When you talk about that, it's sort of almost like the stark reflection, isn't it? It's like, okay, so this person knows what they're talking about. It isn't a case of, well, you've just read it in a book, you've actually been through it. And I've only been through it in a relatively minor way. This is sort of like the shot across the bow, as it were. For now, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years' time, but I know at the moment that that's done what it needed to do for me, which is further awaken me to the extra possibilities that I possess, that I perhaps have now made room for. Rather than, you know.
And helped you let go of all those conditioned, limiting thought forms that, you know, we pick up from. Because as soon as you were talking about before we started recording, I just picked up your dad. You know, we do tend to carry those belief structures from our parents, and interestingly enough, it's so hard to see them. Like, we can see them in others. Like, you're a bit stubborn, aren't you? It's like, you know, point at, like, who's stubborn?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
But we, you know, and illness helps you really. It just exaggerates them, and it helps you really see what you're carrying emotionally, and you go, oh my God, I don't need to carry that anymore. Like, thanks, Dad, but here you go, have it back. Or let it go, give it back to the carpenter.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so before we go, any last messages from the carpenter? Because I can tell that he speaks through you.
Yeah.
And, you know, do you feel like when you just click on and you're tapped into that Christ consciousness and it's funneling through you, or can you do that deliberately? I think you can.
Yeah, it's one of these where if I'm ever put in a position like this, there's no scripts. I don't need any scripts. I don't need to rehearse something. I don't need to have looked into what it is that I intend to talk about. I have an idea which I'm given, and then I'll stand on stage and I'll talk about that idea. I actually find planning gets in the way. So I'm far better, especially when I'm either talking to a person or talking to a group of people, just talking. And knowing that when I open my mouth, something will come out that makes sense to it, even if it's just to one person. I don't need to have spoken to that person afterwards to find out whether it has made a message. It has made an impact. I just know that it does. And I suppose that's the message, which is the gift of just knowing that things are going to work out, just knowing that things are okay. Ultimately, everything is okay, regardless of what we egotistically fear. Here, everything is okay, even if it is just that we have to wait till we pass on to get to the other side to realize that. What a waste to get the life review and look back and say, well, actually, it wasn't so bad. I was in this narrow, sort of visionless tunnel where all I could see was my problem, and I hadn't realized all the people that were around me. There's have you ever heard of a guy called Joseph Campbell who sort of
follow your bliss?
Follow your bliss. One of the things on the series that he did with Bill Moyers, he was dealing with a woman that's always felt that she was alone. She was always alone. And through the time he was sort of helping her, she would use art to describe how she was feeling. And one of the pictures she drew was a picture of gold underneath rocks. So she knew the gold was there, but she couldn't get to it. She had a realization that the gold was her friends, her family, and the people that loved her. The next picture that she drew was her being able to access the gold, being able to access what she had already around her. We very often go along life and say what we haven't got. What we don't do is realize what we have, and very often what we have is the gift. It's the thing that we it's the thing that we missed, is the thing that we've already got. We've already got all the answers to every question that we can ever have, if we have a perspective to see it. And it doesn't have to happen all at once. It can be sort of like gradually over time. We can strip fed until the point where something just goes, and then it's sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm not quite as badly off as I thought. I'm actually I have actually got some really good friends, and my family are really supportive. And then to step on to realize that those people are just reflections of us. So when we start to see the positive, when we start to see the loving, we're actually recognizing the loving within us. And we can't not recognize it because it's coming from us for us to be able to recognize it in other people.
You know, the new song that I've put on the end of the show, which is by, I put it up. He says, there's a line in the song that says, what I want, I'm looking through. I just love that. You know, what I'm seeking, I'm looking through. It's such a beautiful, it's like we think that we're looking for something outside, but when you see it inside yourself, you actually get to see that everything you're looking for somewhere else is actually already there, as you say, in the friends and family and support and all those sorts of things. I remember I had a shop years ago, and in the middle of the night it burnt down, and I had that realization. I felt so unsupported, and I had my brother and sister-in-law and then a friend of hers at 4:00 in the morning helping me clean up the mess. I mean, who does that? And I thought, it was like a real sledgehammer moment. You are supported. It's like, look, you know, these people are up at 4:00 in the morning helping you clean up the mess in your shop. And I'm like, wow, yeah, what you want, you're looking through. It's beautiful. Ainsley, it's been such a joy to talk to you today. It's been beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
And I look forward to hearing about what you and Krista get up to in the future, and bright future in front of both of you. So lots of more love to spread and share. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Bye.
Wow, there we go. The beautiful Ainsley Threadgold there. Isn't he gorgeous? Lovely message to bring to you today about contrast. I thought that was so important, that everything that we live, we are pretty much choosing. We're either choosing it from this perspective or we choose it from that perspective. You know, we definitely plan some things in our life, and sometimes these big health crises like he's going through and my family's going through, that might be all part of the plan. Bit of a wake-up call, I feel, for all of us. And remember to go out and buy the book. His story and Krista's story are in the book about their NDEs. We've had them both on the show before, but we didn't talk too much about their story. We talked mostly about the message from their NDEs. But I was just asking Ainsley then, I said, have you read the book? And he goes, no, I haven't read it yet. I said, it's a really good book because it's not just all NDEs. It's people's experiences of death in all myriads of forms of, you know, there's a variety of messages and a variety of stories. It's actually a really fascinating, really good book, but it's pretty traumatic. Lots of trauma in the book, but lots of love and blessings and miracles as well. So let's hope you have a miracle in your life today. A miracle, as I think Marianne Williamson says, is a shift in perspective from fear to love. And that's all we're talking about with all of these shows, is shifting your perspective. It's not where we're going. It's where we are in here. It's just a shift in perspective. And seeing your life through rose-coloured glasses, seeing what you have in your life as divine, beautiful, perfect, just as it's supposed to be. Even if you're experiencing trauma at the moment, it's just as it's supposed to be. Appreciating the now. As Byron Katie says, when you resist the now, you lose, but only 100% of the now. So only 100% of the time, she says. So love the now, and let me know how you go. Put a message underneath and tell me how you're loving your now right now. Thanks for joining me for another show. Love you all. Blessings.